In Hoppers, there is one animal that is taking more than all the others. It's breaking the world with its greed. And that animal is, of course, the human. But the humans aren't even the main villains. And believe it or not, the main villain is this psycho caterpillar. But don't worry, he will become a butterfly. And then, something even worse. And Maple Tanaka is at the center of it all. In today's video, we're counting all the crimes of all the Hoppers characters. And because the movie is set in Beaverton, we're using Oregon state laws to calculate all the potential sentences. First up is our lovable protagonist. Mabel's first on-screen crime takes place during her school years. She steals a bunch of animals: a turtle, a hamster, frogs, birds, a lizard, and a snake. Her desire was to set them free from their unnatural existence in the school, where they were held like classroom pets. But a crime is a crime, no matter how young you are and no matter how good your intentions are. Mabel's crime was theft, but as she tried to leave, she also bit the teacher's hand. And she accidentally activated the sprinklers, which could be counted as property damage. But since she's under 14 here, her misdeeds would be dismissed under Oregon, and the worst outcome would be mandatory counseling or parental responsibility involvement. Years passed by. Mabel's grandmother taught Mabel to find inner peace and listen to the sounds of nature. And Mabel was less angry, but her rebellious ways never disappeared. Then, Mayor Jerry Generazzo planned to extend a highway through the glade by first blowing up a beaver dam. But not while Mabel is there as an animal rights activist. And she's there alright, because she jumped over the fence, and then she went straight to the dam, which was full of dynamite, and she tried to stop them from blowing it up. Trespassing into a dangerous restricted zone is a Class A misdemeanor for which the penalty would be up to 1 year in prison. Interfering with lawful infrastructure work is in her case as a Class B misdemeanor, which would bring another 6 months of prison time. And as she created a real risk of explosion-related harm, it would be another Class A misdemeanor, for which it would be another year in prison. If charged on all counts, her sentence would be up to 2 years in prison. But in a more realistic outcome, her punishment would probably be probation or fines and community service. Just for fun, we can count these early crimes as 1 year of probation. Running count, 1 year of probation. Jerry tells Mabel that since animals stopped coming to the glade, he has every right to build there. He also tells her that if she can gather enough signatures, or if the animals come back, the plans would be canceled. So she tries to collect the signatures, but with no success. But then she gets the idea. In order to save the beaver dam, she just needs to find one beaver and place it there. And she lives in Beaverton, so how hard can it be? Well, Mabel, she tried to find a beaver, and just when she spotted one, he was kidnapped by unknown people from a dark van. So Mabel followed it, all the way to the secret hideout. And of course, she snuck in. And she discovered something quite strange, a laboratory full of animals. But they weren't animals. They were, in fact, robots made to resemble animals, especially beavers. And the technology behind it could transfer human consciousness into them. And Dr. Sam, Mabel's college professor, was behind it all. When she explains to Mabel that these beavers, or hoppers, are the way to infiltrate real animals, Mabel naturally gets the perfect idea: to place her consciousness into a fake beaver and go tell the animals about the evil agenda of Mayor Jerry. Mabel's crime here is, once again, trespassing on private property and theft of highly advanced and expensive technology. For trespassing, she would get 6 months in prison. And for theft of this kind, she would be looking at up to 10 years in prison. She wouldn't get charged for these crimes because Dr. Sam is her professor and friend, but if, in some alternative scenario, she were charged, the likely outcome would be 2 to 4 years. Let's count it as 3 years in prison. Running count, 3 years prison plus 1 year of probation. Mabel then goes to find the animals, but is surprised to see that they have their own kingdom and even their own specific rules. And Mabel even breaks those rules when she stops a bear from eating another beaver. According to the rules, when you gotta eat, eat. Mabel meets the animals and the beaver king named George, and pretty soon she realizes in order to warn the animals about the upcoming danger, she must present the issue to the Animal Council. But the real trouble started when she ended the insect queen's life. Accidentally. The queen was the wise monarch butterfly who led the Animal Council. If we counted this as murder, Mabel would spend the rest of her life in prison. But luckily for her, there are no Oregon laws that state that you can't kill a monarch butterfly. However, The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has proposed listing the monarch as a threatened species under the Federal Endangered Species Act. So the monarch butterfly is the candidate for protection, but the law isn't active yet. So no harm done, from a human perspective. But from the animal perspective, Mabel was a terrorist on the run. And the new insect leader, King Titus, wasn't gonna let her get away with the murder of his mother. Later, Mabel, King George, and a few animals loyal to King George set on a rescue mission to save Mayor Jerry, who was marked for the squish by the Animal Council, which is their professional term for assassination. And naturally, Jerry gets super scared when he sees the animals that somehow entered his car are using his phone to translate and explain what they want. So, from pure fear and paranoia, he opens the window and lets the animals be blown out of the car by the wind. But Mabel stays inside and tries to save her animal friends by taking over the steering wheel. And that's where she breaks a few traffic laws. Her crimes are reckless driving, failure to drive in the proper lane, and public endangerment. Reckless driving and public endangerment are both Class A misdemeanors, both of which could add up to 1 year in prison. Failure to drive within the line is just a traffic violation, for which the fine would be the punishment. The realistic outcome for these charges would be 6 months of prison, and Jerry would be fined for speeding, or it would be reckless driving charges. But considering that he was the mayor who was running away from the assassins, it would probably be forgiven. Mabel total count, 3 years and 6 months of prison plus 1 year probation. Mayor Jerry was just an ordinary, average politician. He was loved by most of the town, and he tried to build a new freeway in residential areas, but the process wasn't 100% legal. Jerry's main crime was placing the artificial trees that emitted sound waves, which drove the animals away from their habitat. Charges? Wildlife harassment, animal abuse, and most importantly, official misconduct. If Jerry were really facing these charges in a court of law, he'd be looking at 6 months in prison for wildlife harassment, plus another 6 months for animal abuse, both Class B misdemeanors. Official misconduct is a Class A misdemeanor, for which he could be charged with up to 1 year in prison. In total, for all these charges, the realistic outcome would be 6 months to 1 year in prison. And, of course, he would be removed from the office. The realistic outcome would be 1 year of prison, and then he's out and he makes some restitution to the community. But since Jerry is the mayor with a lot of connections, let's count it as a fine of $12,500 for the 2 charges of animal and wildlife abuse, $6,250 for official misconduct of the first degree, and finally, 1 year of community service. Pretty good for a corrupt politician. But Jerry even redeems himself in the end, and start seeing things from the animal's perspective. And animals, on the other side, have their own procedures and plans, and their own corrupt and evil rulers. Jerry total count, 1 year of community service, plus the fine of $18,750. The Animal Council, as the ruling entity of the animal kingdom, would be placed on special trial for their crimes. The charges would be attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder, both Class A felonies, for which the council members could face up to 20 years in prison. The most probable outcome would be 20 years per member of the council, not including Titus, who was the mastermind. And then there's Diane, a super nice and lovely shark, according to King George. But from Mayor Jerry's perspective, she's the merciless assassin sent by the Animal Council to perform a nice and safe squish. In human court, under Oregon laws, her crime would be attempted murder, public endangerment, and conspiracy. For attempted murder, she'd be looking at up to 20 years in prison. For public endangerment, up to 1 year, and for conspiracy to commit murder, another 20. In total, she'd be looking at up to 40 years in prison. The realistic outcome would be 15 to 20 years. Let's count it as 15. And she's released in a few years for good behavior. But for the Animal Court of Law, Diane is just a loyal agent, serving the animal crown under the rule of the Animal Council. Council total count, 20 years prison per member. Diane total count, 15 years prison. Dr. Sam and Dr. Nisha were a crazy scientist duo. Dr. Sam did everything by the rules. She just wanted to retrieve her highly classified technology. But Dr. Nisha was a badass scientist and professor, and she often had enough of Mabel's intrusions and chaotic campaigns. So when Mabel infiltrated their lab, Nisha was ready to use an electroshocker on her, but Dr. Sam convinced her to try the peaceful way. However, under Oregon law, the crime of menacing is a Class A misdemeanor for which she would face up to 1 year in prison if she was somehow charged for it, but the most likely outcome would be 6 months probation. Total for Dr. Nisha, 6 months probation. And finally, the psychopathic butterfly himself, all hail Titus. Titus's first on-screen crime occurs when he takes human hostages, including Dr. Sam and Dr. Nisha, and forces them to tie up Mabel and Jerry as prisoners. He then transfers his consciousness into a robotic version of Jerry. In a human court of law, the charges would be kidnapping, coercion, unlawful use of force, identity theft, computer crime, and conspiracy. Kidnapping, a Class B felony, would carry 6 to 7 years in prison per victim. Coercion would add up to 5 years. Unlawful use of force would result in 1 to 3 years. Identity theft is a federal crime that carries a sentence of up to 15 years. Computer crime as another federal crime, in this case accessing and altering a computer system without authorization, could result up to 10 years in prison. Conspiracy may add up to 10 years as well. The probable total outcome would be 20 years in prison. But that's just the beginning, because Titus's plans were much bigger. And so were the crimes. Running count, 20 years. Titus was apparently quite intelligent for a psychopathic insect king, because he realized that the fake loud trees which humans planted in the forest are actually extremely powerful weapons, and that enough of them with the right settings could be used against humans. His plan? To squish as many humans as possible. And in Mayor Jerry's body, he had the right place and opportunity to do it, because a political rally was prepared for Mayor Jerry, and Titus was ready to host it. How exciting it must be to be an insect in a fake human body, and to ask a bunch of humans if they squished any insects lately. And they all just answer truthfully, without realizing that they're looking at the most psychopathic insect of the animal kingdom. But Titus's plans eventually come to an end when Mabel, the animals, Dr. Sam, and Mayor Jerry, now in the body of the robot beaver, went out to stop him. They managed to return him back to his butterfly body, and then he returned to the fake robot body. But when Mabel ripped the silicone mask off the robotic Jerry body, she disrupted the facial recognition, which Titus needed to trigger the sound tree weapons. And in the moment of anger, King Titus made a mistake. He revealed that once he's done with humans, he will squish all the birds, reptiles, amphibians, and everybody else until only the insects remain and the world becomes their hive. In the end, just after the accidental destruction of his robotic human disguise, Titus caused a massive fire. So the additional charges include attempted mass murder of both humans and animals, conspiracy, reckless burning, reckless endangerment, and destruction of property. For reckless burning and endangerment, he'd be looking up to 1 year in prison. For destruction of property, up to 5 years. But these charges would all be irrelevant, because for the attempted mass murder alone, he would quickly receive a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Titus' total count? Life. And that's the final sentence. Who was your favorite character from this movie? And do you think Titus deserved life in prison? Or did he deserve to be squished? Let us know in the comments. And if you liked this video, check out this one to find out what would happen if Zootopia characters were charged for their crimes.